Hi dear students, in this video lesson we are discussing State and Society in Kerala, a core paper of third semester MA Political Science. And this video lesson is prepared by Ranjit Viti, Assistant Professor, School of Distance Education, University of Calicut. This paper includes 5 modules. Module 1, Social and Democratic Basis of Kerala Society. Module 2, The Democratic Phase. Module 3, Grassroots Level Democracy. Module 4, Problems of Economic Growth. And Module 5, New Social Movements, Dalit, OBC, Women Empowerment. Module 1, Social and Democratic Basics of Kerala Society. These books, Kerala Mahatmyam and Keralopati, attribute the genesis of Kerala to Parashurama, sixth incarnation of Vishnu, who set to exterminate 21 generations of the Kshatriyas. The text claimed that as repentance to the human slaughter, Parashurama decided to give some land grants to the Brahmins, but as belonged to the priestly caste himself, he did not possess any land. Parashurama then claimed a new land by throwing axe across the sea. The land emerged thus. Kerala was given as dana to the Brahmins. Both these texts seem to be serving the purpose of glorify the caste system. Interestingly, Kerala Mahatmyam and Keralopati pretended to be a historical document where the myths and legends play more crucial role rather than historical facts, yet incongruous facts. According to Kerala Mahatmyam, Parashurama made Kerala for the Brahmins and the lower caste people were brought in to serve them. Thereby, Keralopati justifies the land ownership of Brahmins in a way similar to the divine right theory of European monarchy. In the Keralopati also said Parashurama created the land of Kerala for Brahmins. The gift made with flour and water for their enjoyment is called the Janmam. Parashurama then sent Shudras from various countries and settled them in the lands as the Adiyans and Kudiyans as tenants for serving Brahmanas. In the book Kerala Malayalikകളുടെ മാതൃഭൂമി, we can see a historical approach to the emergence of caste system in Kerala. The Brahmins migrated to Kerala seem to have done a similar process of destruction and degeneration in Kerala society. In this process, they were assisted by the dominant class of Kerala existed at that time. While the Brahmins entered the scene, the Nayar did align with the Brahmins against the others in Kerala. The result of this struggle is the stratification of the society into Savarnas and Avarnas, where the Savarnas divided the land between them, leaving the Avarnas as landless workers. Unlike the British, who believed in power through controlling the ruling class, Brahmins concentrated on the land acquisition and through it indirectly controlling the society. Again, the argument of EMS regarding the issue, the arrival of Brahmins and their dominance on the land through the establishment of Janmi system appear to be the most acceptable. A historical approach to the caste system in Kerala society can be found in the book Keralam Malayalugalude Madribhumi. The Brahmins migrated to Kerala seem to have done a similar process of destruction and degeneration in the Kerala society. In this process, they were assisted by the dominant class of Kerala existed at that time. While the Brahmins entered the scene, the Nayars did align with the Brahmins against others in Kerala. The result of this struggle is the stratification of the society into Savarnas and Avarnas, where the Savarnas divided the land between them, leaving the Avarnas as landless workers. Unlike the British, who believed in power through controlling the ruling class, Brahmins concentrated on the land acquisition and through it indirectly controlling the society. Again, the arguments of EMS regarding the issue regarding the arrival of Brahmins and their dominance on the land through the establishment of Janmi system appear to be most acceptable. Brahmins achieved the land ownership in the majority of Kerala. The feudal system in Kerala can be called as Janmi Naduvari Medhavittam, or the domination of the upper caste. The Janmis and the local chieftains got established in this period. Brahmin was already started acquiring the land through the route of Devaswam to Brahmaswam, transferring of land. The Devaswam lands were primarily given to the temple, which was obviously enjoyed by the Brahmins. However, by coming the Christianity, especially in Tiruvidankur, most of the caste preferred to convert to Christianity, which offered them better economical, social and pedagogical opportunities. The caste system in Kerala followed certain customs to retain the social structure. The system of caste hierarchy aimed at the division of the society and created its own devices of segregation, namely endogamy, laws of inheritance, the law of sharing the foods, and most potent and worst of all, the untouchability. The word for untouchability in Malayalam language is Aitam or Tindal. Aitam probably comes from the Sanskrit word Ashuddha, meaning impure, stand for the whole system of caste hierarchy and segregation based on purity. The word Tindal originated from the Malayalam word Todu, meaning touch. Even now, visiting the Kerala temple, one can get a glimpse of the Tindal when the Shanti gives you the prasadam of offering. He drops it into the receiver's hand, leaving the distance of at least 1 feet between the devotee and himself. Here he is keeping the distance of Tindal. Thereby, the class system in Kerala was based on the social position, not economic status. The social stratification is on by birth, which is known as caste. Socio-economic conditions in Kerala. The caste system created a hierarchical order and divided society into a number of groups based upon ascription, within which mobility was impossible. The status of the individual in society was determined by the norms of caste. In the traditional hierarchy, the Malayali Brahmin, known as Nambudiri, occupied a foremost place in the social system. Nayars also had a high status in the social structure. Nambudiris and Nayars constituted the major land-owning group of pre-colonial and early colonial Kerala. As a result, a rigid and feudal order existed, marked with the caste atrocities and several institutional mechanisms were codified and established. The upper caste controlled the major portion of the land. During the British era, the Janmis or the landlords became more powerful as the Britishers wanted their active support and cooperation in sustaining their own authority. The depressed caste received inhuman treatment at the hands of the upper caste as the law was not egalitarian. Aggressive slavery in the primitive form prevailed even in the beginning of the 19th century. The groups belonging to the lower strata of the society, especially the outer caste, had to undergo numerous tribulations because of the caste structure prevalent in the society. Kerala society before the 19th century accepted inequality, discrimination and caste oppression. The impact of this oppression and deprivation was heaviest on lower caste. These agnostic slaves were the real tillers of the soil. Women of lower caste, including Idava, were prevented from covering the upper part of the body. Slaves were denied social privilege like wearing clothes, using public roads, using metallic ornaments, etc. Even Nayars were denied some privileges like wearing gold ornaments, using certain type of clothes, etc. On the ceremonial occasions and on the death of a person, customary payment to Naduvaris or landlords were also prevalent at that time. Holding of umbrella was prohibited to all castes except Brahmins. Backward castes were denied entry to schools, temples and other public services. Untouchability and unapproachability were common practices. All these restricted social mobility, including inter-caste marriages and interdining between various subcastes. Child marriage and polygamy were institutionalized. Traditionally, cultivation or manual labor was regarded as a degraded occupation by the upper caste. Due to these miserable conditions, several low caste groups were attracted towards Islam and Christianity. And their degraded condition also invited the attention of missionaries who came to work among them. The East India Company, with the help of these missionaries, established schools in different parts of Malabar and admitted students regardless of caste and creed. Economic factors also introduced change in the lives of the lower caste. Plantation and cash crops were introduced in the early 19th century, which required agricultural labor. This resulted in the abolition of slavery in the middle of 19th century. The political and administrative policies of the colonial authorities on land and other areas also helped in introducing changes in the rigid caste structure. Along with these missionary activities, the new nationalist movement arose in the early 20th century. Fresh kinds of thinking among the educated lower caste and even among some higher castes. Social reform and democratic movements in Kerala. From 1812, subversive forces were forming and developing to question the incongruous social practices existed in Kerala. This social transformation gradually led Kerala into the mainstream of political struggle for freedom and responsible government in the 20th century. The important outcome of this ferment was the awakening of the masses, especially the lower order in the Hindu society, against social justice and evils. This awakening found articulation in Kerala towards the last quarter of the 19th century. A number of socio-religious reform movements, which were also the earliest democratic mass movements in Kerala, took shape. On the whole, these movements were peaceful and non-violent. These movements were of utmost significance because Kerala had for centuries tolerated the caste system in its most oppressive form. The rigid caste system existed in such a heinous way that the lower orders were not only untouchables but unapproachable as well. In Malabar, social status and economic competence of the individual was still determined by his position in the caste hierarchy. Until the 20th century, governmental positions were denied to lower caste and non-Hindus. The reformers of Kerala belonged to two broad categories. The first group believed that change in belief and behavior were to be effected through the influence of religion, and the second group organized themselves under non-religious leadership and gained their ends through constitutional means. One of the most important social reform movement was spearheaded by Sri Narayana Guru, the great Hindu saint and social reformer. The Guru was born in 1856 in the Irava community, which had a status far below that of Nambudiris. He fearlessly criticized and campaigned against the rigors of the caste system, the Brahmin hegemony, and the numerous social disabilities of Iravas and other lower caste. Soon, Sri Narayana Guru became the rallying point for the Iravas and other backward classes to unite and organize. The Sri Narayana Dharma Parivalana Yogam, literally the Society for the Propagation of Moral Teaching of Sri Narayana, came into being on 15th May 1903. Within a short period, the Guru and Yogam drew towards them a brilliant band of dedicated workers, including the poet Kumaranashan, whose efforts constitute an eloquent testament to what a community submitted to centuries of tyranny can do and achieve through unity, realism, and organism. A program of action founded upon such sublime humanism and social purpose was not destined to remain confined to one caste only. It soon became the philosophy of Hindu reformation, encompassing all castes including Brahmin. The Nayars also felt the need for reform. Until the 19th century, the Nayars had a preeminent role in Kerala. Institutions like the Sambandham, non-legal marriage, and the matrilineal joint family system, which had ensured the strength of the Nayar community. The impact of the market economy, the absorption of new values through the new system of education, the self-consciousness being generated among the lower caste, and their cry for equality and privileges brought about a decline of Nayar dominance. The sense of decline gave an impetus to the spirit of reform that expressed in the work of religious men like Chattambi Swamigal, and later in legislative enactments in respect of marriage, inheritance, property rights, etc. Ultimately, the movements crystallized in the foundation of Nayar Service Society in 1914. As a matter of fact, in varying degree, social reform movements' impact affected every caste in Hindu society as well as the Christians and the Muslims. there are certain specific events that significantly raise the role of social reform initiatives in Kerala. Viking Satyagraha. The first major struggle for temple entry was the famous Viking Satyagraha led by K.K. Kelappan and A.K. Gopalan. Viking Satyagraha is a movement had set on foot to demand admission for these certain sections of the people, the so-called untouchables, banned from appearing in public roads adjacent to the famous temple at Viking. A resolution was moved in the Legislative Council demanding the opening of the temple roads to the Avarna Hindus. Public opinion in the state was so favorable that the government threw open the approach roads to the Avarnas. Mahatma Gandhi called it Bedrock of Freedom because the settlement is a document between the people and the state, constituting a big step in the direction of liberty in one respect at least. The movement for temple entry resulted in the overwhelming victory of the reform movement in the history of Kerala when Sri Chittra Tirunal Balarama Varma, the Maharaja of Travancore, issued his famous temple entry proclamation on November 12, 1936. Guruvayur Satyagraha. Kerala Provincial Congress Committee decided to begin Satyagraha before the famous temple at Guruvayur with effect from the 1st November 1931. It was a movement for temple entry and abolition of untouchability. The Satyagraha began accordingly under the leadership of Sri K. Kelappan. Among the Kerala leaders other than Kelappan were Mannat Padmanabhan, A.K. Gopalan and N.P. Damodaran. Guruvayur began to attract the attention of all India. After the movement had run its course for about 10 months, Kelappan entered on a fast before the temple on September 21, 1932. The fast electrified the atmosphere. On October 2, 1932, Kelappan broke his fast in response to Gandhiji's wishes. Thereafter, a referendum was held among the Hindus to find out their views on the question of temple entry. More than 77% of the Hindus expressed themselves in favor of temple entry. The Guruvayur temple was thrown open to Harijans only in 1946. Democratic and temple entry struggle. The promulgation of the temple entry proclamation was a reform of far-reaching importance. Due to the changes in society, a number of social reforms acts were also passed which had a direct impact on the consciousness and the position of the lower caste. The Ezhava Act 1925, Nanjanadu Vellala Act 1926, the Cochin Nayar Act of 1937-38, then Mappala Marumakkathayam Act of 1939. Changes on land also took place which were beneficial to lower caste tenants. Patam Proclamation of 1865, Jenmi Kudiyan Regularities of 1896, the Cochin Verum Patamdar Act 1943, the Malabar Compensation for Tenants Improvements Act of 1887, the Malabar Tenancy Act of 1930, Stay of Eviction Proceeding Act 1950, Stay of Eviction Proceeding Act 1957, the Kerala Agriculturalist Debt Relief Act 1958, the Kerala Agrarian Relation Act 1960, the Kerala Land Reform Act of 1963. Shanar agitation. The agitation by the lower caste Shanar women for the right to dress like the upper caste was an important movement in the late 1800s. In 1829, a royal proclamation was issued prohibiting all backward communities from wearing upper garments and ornaments made of gold or silver. After continuous agitation, the then Diwan, Colonel Munro, issued an order permitting Shanar women who were converted to Christianity to cover the upper part of the bodies with jacket. The agitation of the Shanar eventually led to the royal proclamation on July 26, 1859, abolishing all restrictions in the matter of the covering of the upper part of the body by Shanar women, though they were not still permitted to imitate the dress of women of upper class. Role of Ayyankali. One of the early social reformers who worked for social change in modern times was Ayyankali, who fought against the social taboo of untouchability among the downtrodden, especially among the untouchables. He gave leadership to the movement started by Poleas and other oppressed classes for their social upliftment. In 1907, Ayyankali was found Sadhujana Paripalana Yogam and established a wide network all over the state, and with its initiative, a campaign for the upliftment of the untouchables began. He started a Malayalam monthly magazine, Sadhujana Paripalani. It was a result of constant struggle and agitation under his leadership that the Pulaya community secured the right to walk free along public roads in Trivandrum and to enter schools. Growth of representative institutions in Kerala. Pre-independence period 1888 to 1947. The proposal for the formation of a legislative body in Travancore was readily approved by Sri Moolam Tirunal Maharaja. The regulation was passed on 30th March 1888, creating a legislative council of 3 years tenure and composed of 8 members, of whom 6 were to be officials and 2 non-officials nominated by the Maharaja. On the 1st of October 1904, one more representative body named the Sri Moolam Popular Assembly of Travancore was formed. A parallel development emerged in Cochin, where the Cochin Legislative Council Regulation Act 1923 provided for a legislative council. Malabar, which was a district of Madras province under the British rule, had representatives in Madras Legislative Assembly from 1920s. Responsible governments 1947 to 1956. On September 4, 1947, the Maharaja of Travancore announced the move to establish a responsible government. A new assembly called a representative body was to function as the Constituent Assembly. 120 members were elected on the basis of adult franchise. A council of ministers under the prime ministership of Sri Pattam Thanupillai began to serve from March 24, 1948. In October 1948, Sri T.K. Narayana Pillai succeeded as the Prime Minister. The responsible government in Cochin took form on August 40, 1947. The first Prime Minister, Sri Panampalli Govindamenon, served from September 1, 1947 to October 22, 1947. His successor, Sri T.K. Nair, had a tenure of office from October 27, 1947 to September 20, 1948, and adult franchise was introduced in 1948. The Legislative Council was renamed as Legislative Assembly. And in the case of Madras, the first Legislative Assembly of Madras, created under the Government of India Act of 1935, and there were 16 members from Malabar. The second assembly had 20 members, and that was from 1946 to 1951. And the first Legislative Assembly of Madras was from 1937 to 46. The merger of Travancore and Cochin was realized on July 1st, 1949. The Maharaja of Travancore became the Raja Pramukh of the new Travancore Cochin state. The first Legislative Assembly was composed of 178 members of the legislative bodies of Travancore and Cochin. Shri T.K. Narayana Pillai, the Chief Minister of Travancore, became the Chief Minister of the new state. The ministry headed by Shri T.K. Narayana Pillai resigned on March 1st, 1951, and the ministry headed by Shri C.K. Keshavam came to power on 3rd March 1951, which continued till 12 March 1952. The first general election to the Madras Legislative Assembly held in 1951 after the adoption of the Constitution of India brought in 29 members from Malabar region to the Madras Legislative Assembly. In the Travancore Cochin state, elections were held in January 1954 to the 118-member assembly. Shri V. Gangadharan was elected as the Speaker on 22nd March 1954. This ministry, which fell in 1955, was succeeded by the ministry of Shri Panamballi Govinda Menon, who had to end the term on March 23, 1956, due to the resignation of 6 members. On the service of the Raja Pramukh, President's rule was imposed in the state for the first time, and the assembly was dissolved. Now come to our second module, United Nations and Human Rights. And in this module, we will discuss Universal Declaration, international covenants as civil and political rights, social, cultural and economic rights, institutional structures and implementation of human rights. The United Nations and human rights. United Nations made efforts to protect human rights. While we are going through the UN Charter, we can find articles which aim to protect human rights. UN Charter Article 1, it says the UN set out to maintain international peace and security, to develop friendly relations among nations, and to achieve international cooperation in solving international problems. A peaceful global society, a peaceful world society is essential for the protection of human rights. Furthermore, the organization aims for promoting and encouraging respect for human rights and for fundamental freedoms for all without distinction as to race, sex, language, or religion. The respect and enhancement of human rights are an inherent part of UN system. Let's see the role of different organs of UN in protecting human rights. First one, General Assembly. The General Assembly is considered the legislative wing of the UN, which entitled to discuss any question or any matters within the scope of the UN Charter, which therefore include human rights issues. Article 13 of UN Charter says that General Assembly shall initiate studies and make recommendation for the purpose of assisting in the realization of human rights and fundamental freedom for all without distinction to race, sex, language, or religion. Thus, the General Assembly has far-reaching competence and possibilities concerning human rights. It has adopted numerous resolutions and declarations covering human rights questions, and although its declarations are not legally binding, they have often been a precursor for binding international treaties. According to the UN Charter, the General Assembly is entitled to set up subsidiary organs to perform its functions, which are called committees. 2 of the 6 General Assembly's main committees are entrusted to deal with human rights issues. The Social, Humanitarian and Cultural Committee and the Legal Committee. These 2 committees are related to human rights protection. The 2 committees often add comments and changes to proposed human rights documents before they are submitted to the plenary General Assembly for approval. The main functions of General Assembly related to human rights can be identified as leadership and oversight of the UN human rights system, budgetary responsibility for UN human rights institutions, participation in standard setting, and scrutinizing individual countries. Security Council. The Security Council principal responsibility is to promote the establishment and maintenance of international peace and security. Although the Security Council was initially reluctant to be involved in human rights matters, its activities and decisions have increasingly been influenced by and relevant for human rights considerations. Especially the discussions in the context of the development of the responsibility to protect are inherently interwoven with human rights considerations. The Economic and Social Council. According to the UN Charter, the Economic and Social Council is one of the core UN bodies dealing with human rights. Economic and Social Council is entitled to make recommendations for the purpose of promoting respect for and observance of human rights and fundamental freedom for all. In Article 62, it says that the body may further prepare draft conventions for submission to the General Assembly, and it may initiate international conferences relating to matters falling within its competence. In addition, Economic and Social Council is entitled to receive regular reports from the specialized agencies, and it has the power to set up commissions in economic and social field and for the promotion of human rights and other commission required for the performance of its functions. The fourth organ of UN, the International Court of Justice. The International Court of Justice is defined as the principal judicial organ of the UN by Article 92 of the UN Charter. Although the International Court of Justice is not a human rights court, it has been noted on many occasions that the court has decided on human rights in its judicial as well as advisory role. Judgments or advisory opinions may help clarify the interpretations of provisions of international human rights instruments or spell out the legal obligations of states under these instruments. Human Rights Council. In June 2006, the first session of the Human Rights Council took place in Geneva, replacing the Commission on Human Rights. The Human Rights Council was established by a resolution adopted by the General Assembly on 3rd April 2006. The Human Rights Council took over the role and responsibilities of Commission on Human Rights. Its responsibilities involve a wide range of tasks in the field of human rights, inter alia to promote human rights, education and learning, to function as an arena for dialogue on human rights, to make recommendation to the General Assembly to further develop international laws in this field, to promote and monitor the full implementation of human rights obligations undertaken by the member states, to work together the prevention of human right violation, to closely work together with governments, regional organizations, national human rights institutions, and civil society in the field of human rights, and to make recommendations with regard to the promotion and protection of human rights. The Human Rights Council Advisory Committee. It consists of 18 independent experts which are nominated by governments and elected by Human Rights Council. The Human Rights Council's Advisory Committee supports the work of the Human Rights Council. Its main responsibility is to provide expertise to the Council in the manner and form requested by the Council, focusing mainly on studies and research-based advice. United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights. The post of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights was created by General Assembly on 7th January 1994. The High Commissioner for Human Rights is appointed by the Secretary General of the UN and approved by the General Assembly, and has a fixed term of 4 years with the option to be reappointed for another term of 4 years. United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights is the UN official with principal responsibility for UN human rights activities under the direction and authority of the Secretary General. In general, his primary task is the promotion and protection of the effective enjoyment of all civil, cultural, economic, political, and social rights by all. International Labour Organization. The International Labour Organization is one of the UN specialized agencies in accordance with Article 57 and 63 of the UN Charter and has 185 member states. Its objectives are the promotion and realization of standards and fundamental principles and rights at work, the enhancement of equal working and income opportunities for men and women, the advancement of social protection and the strengthening of tripartism and social dialogue. The ILO's mandate is laid down in the ILO Constitution as well as in the so-called Declaration of Philadelphia. Food and Agricultural Organization. The Food and Agricultural Organization, aiming at enhancing food security, eliminating hunger and malnutrition, and improving nutrition and the standard of living of the rural population. The International Fund for Agricultural Development, which funds agricultural development projects with the objective to reduce rural poverty in developing countries. UNESCO. The United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, with the objective of strengthening the mutually supporting pillars of peace, sustainable development and human rights, contributing to poverty eradication and promoting the dialogue among civilizations and cultures. Treaty-based bodies. Treaty-based bodies were created by specialized treaties in order to promote and monitor the implementation of the treaty in question. The following treaty-based bodies are currently in operation: Human Rights Committee, Committee on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, Committee Against Torture, Subcommittee on Prevention of Torture, Committee on the Rights of the Child, Committee on Migrant Workers, Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights was adopted on 10th December 1949. The UDHR is a comprehensive document detailing and articulating human rights. Being a declaration, it is not legally binding. However, it implores states to aspire towards moral obligations. The declaration details all rights that are basic minimum and necessary to enjoy a dignified human life. Universal Declaration of Human Rights is an important declaration adopted by the United Nations General Assembly on 10th December 1948 at Paris. This announcement arose as a result of the bitter experience of the Second World War and represents the first global expression of rights to which all human beings are inherently entitled. It consists of 30 articles which have been elaborated in subsequent international treaties, regional human rights instruments, national constitutions and laws. Have a look on the different articles of UDHR. Article 1, Right to Equality. Article 2, Freedom from Discrimination. Article 3, Right to Life, Liberty, Personal Security. Article 4, Freedom from Slavery. Article 5, Freedom from Torture and Degrading Treatment. Article 6, Right to Recognition as a Person before the law. Article 7, Right to Equality before the law. Article 8, Right to Remedy by Competent Tribunal. Article 9, Freedom from Arbitrary Arrest and Exile. Article 10, Right to Fair Public Hearing. Article 11, Right to be considered innocent until proven guilty. Article 12, Freedom from interference with privacy, family, home and correspondence. Article 13, Right to free movement in and out of the country. Article 14, Right to asylum in other countries from persecution. Article 15, Right to a nationality and the freedom to change it. Article 16, Right to marriage and family. Article 17, Right to own property. Article 18, Freedom of Belief and Religion. Article 19, Freedom of Opinion and Information. Article 20, Right of Peaceful Assembly and Association. Article 21, Right to participate in government and in free elections. Article 22, Right to Social Security. Article 23, Right to desirable work and to join trade unions. Article 24, Right to rest and leisure. Article 25, Right to adequate living standard. Article 26, Right to education. Article 27, Right to participate in the cultural life of community. Article 28, Right to a social order that articulates this document. Article 29, Community duties essentially to free and full development. Article 30, Freedom from state or personal interference in the above rights. International covenants as civil and political rights. This covenant came into existence in 1966 in response to the inadequacies of UDHR. The critics of UDHR says it is a Western document and nothing to do with socialistic principles and third world countries. Most of the critics argue that UDHR only satisfies the interest of the Western countries, neglecting large number of countries living outside Europe. In 1966, Two important declarations drastically changed the concept of human right. These are International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and International Covenant on Economic and Social Rights. The International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights recognizes the inherent dignity of each individual and undertakes to promote conditions within states to allow the enjoyment of civil and political rights. Countries that have ratified the covenant are obligated to protect and preserve basic human rights and to take administrative, judicial, and legislative measures in order to protect the rights enshrined in the treaty and to provide an effective remedy. There are currently 74 signatories and 168 parties to the ICCPR. International Covenants on Social, Cultural, and Economic Rights. International human rights law comprises the International Bill of Human Rights, which consists of UDHR, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. The separation in civil and political rights and economic, social, cultural rights took place as a result of the Cold War politics and dynamics between the two blocs. International Covenant on Social, Cultural, and Economic Rights was open for signature, ratification, and accession by the General Assembly resolution of 16th December 1966. It came into force 3rd January 1976. Human Rights Watch. Human Rights Watch is a non-profit, non-governmental human rights organization consisting of roughly 400 staff members around the globe. It established in 1978. Human Rights Watch is known for its accurate fact-finding, impartial reporting, effective use of media, and targeted advocacy, often in partnership with local human rights groups. Human Rights Watch defends the rights of people worldwide. They investigate abuses, expose the facts widely, and pressure those with power to respect rights and secure justice. Human Rights Watch is an independent international organization that works as part of a vibrant movement to uphold human dignity and advance the cause of human rights for all. Their work is guided by international human rights and humanitarian law and respect for the dignity of each human being. To ensure their independence, they do not accept government funds directly or indirectly or support from any private funder that could compromise their objectivity and independence. Amnesty International. Amnesty International is an organization of more than 7 million supporters, activists, and volunteers in over 150 countries, with complete independence from government, corporate, or national interests. Its vision is one of the world in which every person, regardless of race, religion, gender, or ethnicity, enjoy all of the human rights enshrined in the UDHR and other international human rights standards. Module 3, Human Rights in India. In this chapter, we have to go through constitutional mandate, political and socio-economic rights, fundamental rights, and directive principles. Human Rights Indian Scenario. Section 2, Clause D of the Protection of Human Rights Act 1993 defines human rights as the rights relating to life, liberty, equality, and dignity of the individual guaranteed by the Constitution or embodied in the international covenants and enforced by the court in India. One of the unique features of the Indian Constitution is that a large part of human rights are included in fundamental rights part of the Constitution, and right to enforce fundamental rights itself has been made a fundamental right. The fundamental rights incorporated in the Constitution of the country is considered as the Magna Carta of individuals' liberty and human rights. Even before Indian independence, the framers of Indian Constitution took utmost care and attention to include the basic human rights of all human beings and embodied them in the Preamble and Part 3 of the Constitution. Besides fundamental rights and directive principles of state policy, the Preamble of Indian Constitution itself containing certain ideologies ensuring human rights. These are justice, social, economic and political, liberty of thought, expression and belief, equality of status and opportunity, and fraternity ensuring dignity of individuals, freedom of speech and expression, etc. have also been incorporated as fundamental rights of citizens of India. These principles are considered as founding pillars of Indian democracy, which the people of India are solemnly resolved to follow. The basic purpose of the Preamble is to ensure protection of rights and freedom of all citizens without any discrimination whatsoever. Constituent Assembly and Human Rights. The Indian Constitution was drafted by the Constituent Assembly of India. It was a great task performed by the leaders of India for framing a constitution after suffering from severe exploitation and denial of justice from colonial powers to vast number of Indian people. The Constitution of India gave primary importance to human rights. Ramachandra Guha said that the demand for a declaration of human rights arose from four factors: lack of civil liberty in India during the British rule, deplorable social condition particularly affecting the untouchables and women, existence of different religious, linguistic and ethnic groups encouraged and exploited by the Britishers, exploitation of the tenants by the landlords. The Constituent Assembly incorporated in the Constitution of India the essence of the rights proclaimed and adopted by the General Assembly in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Further, on 10th December 1948, when the Constitution of India was in the making, the General Assembly proclaimed and adopted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which surely influenced the framing of Indian Constitution. Viewed from the Indian standpoint, human rights have been synthesized, as it were, not as an integrated fabric by the preamble promises and various constitutional clauses of the National Charter of 1950. Human rights and Indian Constitution. The preamble of Indian Constitution declares India to be a sovereign democratic republic. Later in 1976, by 42nd Amendment of the Constitution, the concept of socialist secular were added. The term democratic denotes that the government gets its authority from the will of the people. It gives a feeling that they all are equal, irrespective of the race, religion, language, sex, and culture. The preamble to the Constitution alleges justice, social, economic, and political, liberty of thought, expression, belief, faith and worship, equality of status and of opportunity, and fraternity, assuring the dignity of the individual and the unity and integrity of the nation to all its citizens. Development of human rights in India. History of human civilization reveals that human rights existed throughout the age in one name or the other. The idea of human right was not new to the political thinkers. The vision to secure human rights and fundamental freedom for all and everywhere existed even in the Vedic times. The modern form of human rights jurisprudence originated in India at the time of British rule. But the Indians were discriminated in the enjoyment of civil and political liberties. This was criticized by the enlightened freedom fighters such as Gandhi and others of that time. Collective movements too were originated to demand for the basic rights. This was reflected for the first time in the Charter Act of 1833. Similarly, the Charter Act of 1833 conferred upon Indians to enjoy few political rights by allowing them to participate in governance subject to certain limitations. Further, the declaration to recognize respect for religion by being a secular state. Queen Victoria in 1833 ensured that there will be no interference with religious beliefs and worship of any of the subjects by further declaring that no one would be favored and molested by reasons of one's religious faith and observances. Additionally, it also provided that all shall enjoy the equal and impartial admittance to public offices and assignment to duties of which any subject by his education, ability and integrity was qualified to discharge. Subsequently, the Swaraj Bill of India 1895 spoke about freedom of speech, right to privacy and equality, right to franchise and punishment for specific offense only. Now we have to discuss two important acts passed by the British government which played a major role in the evolution of the concept of human right and evolution of fundamental right in our constitution. That are Government of India Act of 1909 and the Government of India Act of 1935. So come to Government of India Act of 1909. An important development in the evolution of human rights in India is traceable to the Government of India Act of 1909, which in pursuance of the demands for fundamental rights initiated through the Home Rule Bill prepared by the Indian National Congress provided for equality of opportunity in public services. It was also provided that such opportunity in public services must exclude the considerations of religion. Other resolutions of the National Congress made between 1917 and 1919 reiterated the demand for conferment of civil rights and equality of status with English persons. At the time of Montagu Chelmsford Report, which led to the enactment of the Government of India Act of 1919, the Indian National Congress became very intense as they pressed for reforms. Government of India Act 1935 and Human Rights in India. In 1928, Nehru Committee report demanded for fundamental rights for the people of India. The Simon Commission rejected Nehru report, and which consequently led to the next important session at Karachi held by the National Congress to adopt a detailed program of fundamental rights and duties and economic and social change. At the same time, the Government of India Act 1935 was being prepared to be substitute for the Government of India Act 1990. Government of India Act of 1935, the Britishers considered it as a great step in the direction of India's advancement towards constitutionalism, but that made no provision for civil liberties and fundamental rights. Thus, it was recommended to the British government that fundamental right to be included in it. But British government straight away rejected the demand for rights. In 1939, when the Second World War broke out, in which Europe and Great Britain were involved, the constitutional machinery in India was suspended and the nationalist aspirations of the Indian people were suppressed. When the war ended in 1935, the issue of India's independence was reconsidered. And after negotiations and discussions, a Constituent Assembly was set up in 1946 for the purpose of framing the Constitution to an independent India. Fundamental rights. In every democratic state, all the citizens have got some rights for the development of life. These rights are given to them by the constitution of that state. They have the force of law behind them. No government can take them away. And if any government dare to do so, citizen can go to the court to get justice. Only such kind of justiciable rights are called fundamental rights. A man's fullest development is not possible without these rights. What is the importance of fundamental rights? These rights are necessary for the development of man's life. They assure him all his physical, mental, and moral development. Without these rights, we cannot make our life happy and prosperous. The importance of these rights lies in the fact that they have been granted by the Constitution of India. If any government tries to snatch them away, we can go to the court to get justice. Classification of fundamental rights. Fundamental rights enumerated in the Indian Constitution are classified into right to equality, right to freedom, right against exploitation, right to freedom of religion, cultural and educational rights, and right to constitutional remedies. Let's discuss all these rights in detail. Right to equality, Article 14 to 18. The right to equality is one of the chief guarantees of the Constitution. It is embodied in Article 14 to 16, which collectively encompass the general principles of equality before law and non-discrimination, and Articles 17 and 18, which collectively encompass further the philosophy of social equality. Article 14 guarantees equality before law as well as equal protection of the law to all persons within the territory of India. This includes the equal subjection of all persons to the authority of law as well as equal treatment of persons in similar circumstances. Article 15 prohibits discrimination on the grounds only of religion, race, caste, sex, place of birth, or any of them. This right can be enforced against the state as well as private individuals which regard to free access to places of public entertainment or places of public resort maintained partially or wholly out of state fund. However, the state is not precluded from making special provisions for women and children or any socially and educationally backward classes of citizens, including scheduled caste and scheduled tribes. This exception has been provided since the classes of people mentioned therein are considered deprived and in need of special protection. Article 16 guarantees equality of opportunity in matters of public employment and prevent the state from discriminating against anyone in matter of employment on the grounds only of religion, race, caste, sex, descent, place of birth, place of residence, or any of them. It creates exceptions for the implementation of measures of affirmative actions for the benefit of any backward class of citizens in order to ensure adequate representation in public service, as well as reservation of an office of any religious institutions for a person professing that particular religion. The practice of untouchability has been declared an offence punishable by law under Article 17, and the Protection of Civil Rights Act 1955 has been enacted by the Parliament to further this objective. Article 18 prohibits the state from conferring any titles other than military or academic distinctions, and the citizen of India cannot accept titles from a foreign state. Thus, Indian aristocratic titles and a title of nobility conferred by the British have been abolished. However, awards such as the Bharat Ratna have been held to be valid by the Supreme Court on the ground that they are merely decorations and cannot be used by the recipient as title. The second category of fundamental rights, right to freedom. The right to freedom is covered in Article 19 to 22 with the view of guaranteeing individual rights that were considered vital by the framers of the Constitution. And these articles also include certain restrictions that may be imposed by the state on individual liberty under specified conditions. Article 19 guarantees 6 freedoms in the nature of civil rights, which are available only to citizens of India. These include the freedom of speech and expression, freedom of assembly without arms, freedom of association, freedom of movement throughout the territory of our country, freedom to reside and settle in any part of the country of India, and the freedom to practice any profession. All these freedoms are subject to reasonable restrictions that may impose on them by the state, listed under the Article 19 itself. The grounds for imposing these restrictions vary according to the freedom sought to be restricted and includes national security, public order, decency and morality, contempt of court, incitement to offences, and defamation. The state is also empowered in the interest of the general public to nationalize any trade, industry or service to the exclusion of the citizens. The freedoms guaranteed by Article 19 are further sought to be protected by Article 20 to 22. The scope of these articles, particularly with respect to the doctrine of due process, was heavily debated by the Constituent Assembly. Article 20 provides protection from conviction for offences in certain respects, including the right against ex post facto laws, double jeopardy, and freedom from self-incrimination. Article 21, which prevents the encroachment of life or personal liberty by the state except in accordance with the procedure established by law. In 1978, the Supreme Court, in the case of Maneka Gandhi versus Union of India, extended the protection of Article 21 to legislative action, holding that any law laying down a procedure must be just, fair, and reasonable. And in the same case, the Supreme Court also ruled that life under Article 21 meant more than a mere animal existence. It would include the right to live with human dignity and all other aspects which made life meaningful, complete, and worth living. Subsequent judicial interpretations has broadened the scope of Article 21 to include within it a number of rights, including those to livelihood, good health, clean environment, water, speedy trial, and humanitarian treatment while imprisoned. The right to education at elementary level has been made one of the fundamental rights under Article 21A by the 86th Constitutional Amendment Act of 2002. Article 22 provides specific right to arrested and detained persons. In particular, the right to be informed of the grounds of arrest, consult a lawyer of one's own choice, be produced before a magistrate within 24 hours of the arrest, and the freedom not to be detained beyond that period without an order of the magistrate. The third category of fundamental rights, right against exploitation, Article 23 and 24. The right against exploitation contained in Article 23 and 24 lays down certain provisions to prevent exploitation of the weaker sections of the society by individuals or the state. Article 23 prohibits human trafficking, making it an offense punishable by law, and also prohibits forced labor or any act of compelling a person to work without wages where he was legally entitled not to work or to receive remuneration for it. Article 24 prohibits the employment of children below the age of 14 years in factories, mines, and other hazardous jobs. Parliament has enacted the Child Labour Prohibition and Regulation Act 1986, providing regulation for the abolition of and penalties for employing child labour, as well as provisions for rehabilitation of former child labourers. The third category of fundamental rights, rights against exploitation. The right against exploitation contained in Article 23 and 24 lays down certain provisions to prevent the exploitation of the weaker sections of the society by individuals or the state. Article 23 prohibits human trafficking, making it an offense punishable by law, and also prohibits forced labor or any act of compelling a person to work without wages where he was legally entitled not to work or to receive remuneration for it. Article 24 prohibits the employment of children below the age of 14 years in factories, mines, and other hazardous jobs. Parliament has enacted the Child Labour Prohibition and Regulation Act 1986, providing regulations for the abolition of and penalties for employing child labour, as well as provisions for rehabilitation of former child labourers. Fourth category of fundamental right, that is right to freedom of religion. from Article 25 to 28. The right to freedom of religion, covered in Article 25 to 28, provides religious freedom to all citizens and ensures a secular state in India. According to the Constitution, there is no official state religion, and the state is required to treat all religions impartially and neutrally. Article 25 guarantees all persons the freedom of conscience and the right to preach, practice, and propagate any religion of their choice. Article 26 guarantees all religious denominations and sects, subject to public order, morality, and health, to manage their own affairs in matters of religion, set up institutions of their own for charitable or religious purposes, and on acquire and manage property in accordance with law. Article 27 guarantees that no person can be compelled to pay taxes for the promotion of any particular religion or religious institution. Article 28 prohibits religious instructions in a wholly state-funded educational institution, and educational institutions receiving aid from the state cannot compel any of their members to receive religious instructions or attend religious worship without their consent. Fifth fundamental right, cultural and educational rights. The cultural and educational rights mentioned in Article 29 and 30 are bound to protect the rights of cultural, linguistic, and religious minorities by enabling them to conserve their heritage and protecting them against discrimination. Article 29 grants any section of citizens having a distinct language, script, culture of its own the right to conserve and develop the same, and thus safeguards the right of minorities by preventing the state from imposing any external culture on them. Article 30 confers upon all religious and linguistic minorities the right to set up and administer educational institutions of their choice in order to preserve and develop their own culture, and prohibits the state, while granting aid, from discriminating against any institution on the basis of the fact that it is administered by a religious or cultural minority. The sixth and the most important fundamental right, right to constitutional remedies. Article 32. The right to constitutional remedies empowers citizens to approach the Supreme Court of India to seek enforcement or protection against infringement of their fundamental rights. Article 32 provides a guaranteed remedy in the form of a fundamental right itself for enforcement of all the other fundamental rights, and the Supreme Court is designated as the protector of these rights by the Constitution. The Supreme Court has been empowered to issue writs, namely habeas corpus, mandamus, prohibition, certiorari, and quo warranto, for the enforcement of the fundamental rights. While the High Court have been empowered under Article 226, which is not a fundamental right in itself, to issue these prerogative writs, even in case not involving the violation of fundamental rights. Directive principles of state policy. The directive principles of state policy, embodied in Part 4 of the Constitution, are directions given to the state to guide the establishment of an economic and social democracy as proposed by the Preamble. They set forth the humanitarian and social institutions that were the aim of social revolution envisaged in India by the Constituent Assembly. The state is expected to keep these principles in mind while framing laws and policies, even though they are non-justiciable in nature. Though being non-justiciable, the directive principles act as a check on the state. It serves as an instrument in the hands of the electorate and the opposition to measure the performance of a government at the time of an election. Article 37 states that though the directive principles are not enforceable in any court of law, declares them to be fundamental to the governance of the country and imposes an obligation on the state to apply them in matters of legislation. Thus, they serve to emphasize the welfare state model of the Constitution and emphasize the positive duty of the state to promote the welfare of the people by affirming social, economic, and political justice, as well as to fight income inequality and ensure individual dignity as mentioned in Article 38. Article 39 lays down certain principles of policy to be followed by the state, including providing an adequate means of livelihood for all citizens, equal pay for equal work for men and women, proper working conditions, reduction of the concentration of wealth and means of production from the hands of a few, and the distribution of community resources to subserve the common good. Article 41 to 43 mandate the state to endeavor to secure to all citizens the right to work, a living wage, social security, maternity relief, and a decent standard of living. Article 43 also places upon the state the responsibility of promoting cottage industries, and the federal government has, in furtherance of this, established several boards for the promotion of khadi, handlooms, etc. in coordination with the state governments. Article 39A requires the state to provide free legal aid to ensure that opportunities for securing justice are available to all citizens, irrespective of economic or other disabilities. Article 43A mandates the state to work towards securing the participation of workers in the management of industries. The state under Article 46 is also mandated to promote the interest of and work for the economic uplift of the scheduled caste and scheduled tribes and protect them from discriminating and exploitation. Article 44 encourages the state to secure a uniform civil code for all citizens by eliminating discrepancies between various personal laws currently in force in the country. Article 45 originally mandated the state to provide free and compulsory education to children between the age of 6 and 14 years, but after the 86th Amendment in 2002, this has been converted into a fundamental right and replaced by an obligation upon the state to secure childhood care to all children below the age of 6. Article 47 commits the state to raise the standard of living and improve public health and prohibit the consumption of intoxicating drinks and drugs injurious to health. The state is also mandated by Article 48 to organize agriculture and animal husbandry on modern and scientific lines by improving breeds and prohibiting slaughter of cattle. Article 48A mandates the state to protect the environment and safeguard the forest and wildlife of the country. Article 49 places an obligation upon the state to ensure the preservation of monuments and objects of national importance. Article 50 requires the state to ensure the separation of judiciary from executive in public services in order to ensure judicial independence, and federal legislation has been enacted to achieve these objectives. The state, according to Article 51, must also strive for the promotion of international peace and security, and Parliament has been empowered under Article 253 to make laws giving effect to international treaties. India and Universal Declaration. India was a signatory to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. A number of fundamental rights guaranteed to the individuals in Part 3 of the Indian Constitution are similar to the provisions of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Fourth module, Instrumentalities for Protecting Human Rights. In this chapter, we will discuss Judiciary, National Human Rights Commission, Media, Right to Information Act, and Public Interest Litigation. Judiciary and Human Rights. Judiciary in every country has an obligation and a constitutional role to protect human rights of citizens. As per the mandate of the Constitution of India, this function is assigned to the superior judiciary, namely the Supreme Court of India and High Courts. The Supreme Court of India is perhaps one of the most active courts when it comes into the matter of protection of human rights. It has great reputation of independence and credibility. The Preamble of the Constitution of India encapsulates the objectives of the constitution makers to build a new socio-economic order where there will be social, economic, and political justice for everyone and equality of status and opportunity for all. The judiciary must therefore adopt a creative and purposive approach in the interpretation of fundamental rights and directive principles of state policy embodied in the Constitution with a view to advancing human rights jurisprudence. The promotion and protection of human rights depends upon the strong and independent judiciary. The major contributions of the judiciary to the human rights jurisprudence have been twofold. 1. The substantive expansion of the concept of human rights under Article 21 of the Constitution, and second, the procedural innovations of public interest litigation. Judiciary is the ultimate guardian of the rights of the people. It is the constitutional mandate thrust upon the judiciary to safeguard and protect human rights of the citizens. In India, Supreme Court and High Courts are empowered to take actions to enforce these rights according to Article 32 and 226. These provisions can help an aggrieved person can directly approach Supreme Court and High Court for the protection of his fundamental rights. In such cases, the courts are empowered to issue appropriate order, direction, and writs in the nature of habeas corpus, mandamus, prohibition, quo warranto, and certiorari. National Human Rights Commission. National Human Rights Commission shall consist of a chairperson and 7 other members. A person who has been a Chief Justice of the Supreme Court is alone eligible to become the chairperson. The other members are appointed from the following categories. 1. Member may be sitting or retired judge of the Supreme Court of India. 1 member may or retired Chief Justice of any High Court. 2. members are appointed on the basis of their special knowledge or experience in the field of human rights, and the chairperson of the National Commission for Scheduled Caste, the National Commission for Scheduled Tribes, National Commission for Minorities, and National Commission for Women are the members. Mode of appointment and their tenure. The chairperson and the members of the commission are appointed by the President of India upon the recommendation of a committee consisting of the Prime Minister as the chairperson and 5 other members as specified in the Act. The chairperson and the members of the commission shall continue to hold office for a period of 5 years from the date on which they assume the office or until they attain the age of 70 years, whichever is earlier. The members of the commission alone are eligible for reappointment of one more term, provided if they have not attained the age of 70 years. Removal of the members of Human Rights Commission. The Protection of Human Rights Amendment Act 2006 provides that the chairperson or any member can resign from the post in writing under his hand addressed to the President of India. The President of India can remove the chairperson or any of the members of the commission on the ground of proved misbehavior or incapacity in accordance with the report submitted by the Supreme Court after conducting a due inquiry upon a referral by the President of India. Supporting staff of the Commission. In addition to the chairperson and the members, the Commission shall consist of a Secretary General. He is the Chief Administrative Officer of the Commission. Then police and investigative, administrative, technical and scientific staff to support it in its effective functioning. Headquarters of the Commission. The Commission shall normally conduct its meetings and sittings in its office in New Delhi. However, with the prior permission of the central government, and if in its discretion it is necessary and expedient in its functioning, it can hold a meeting or sittings outside its seat of places as decided by it. Powers and functions of the Commission. First one, to inquire into the violation of human rights or abatement thereof, either on its own or on petition submitted by an affected party or on his behalf by any person, or negligence shown by a public servant in the prevention of such a violation. Second one, to intervene in any of the proceedings pending before a court with the permission of such a court on any complaint of human right violation. To visit any jail or any other institution where persons are detained or lodged for purpose of treatment, reformation or protection under the control of a state government with an advance notice to study the living conditions of the inmates and to make recommendations. Fourth one, to review the safeguards for the protection of human rights provided by the Constitution or any of the existing law and to suggest measures to the central and state governments for their effective implementation. Fifth one, to review all the aspects that inhibits the enjoyment of human rights, including the acts of terrorism, and recommends the remedial measures to the government. Sixth function, to study the treaties and other international instruments on human rights and make recommendations to the central government for their effective implementation. Seventh one, to undertake and promote research in the field of human rights. Eighth one, to propagate the concept of human rights and to promote the awareness for their protection among the various sections of the society. It can undertake publication of books or pamphlets, for conduct seminars, or use the media or any other means available to it. Ninth one, to promote and support the non-governmental organizations and institutions in the field of human rights. Powers of the Commission. The Commission is, though empowered to exercise the powers of the civil court only during the course of inquiring into the complaints. It can also record the facts constituting the offences and the statement of an accused person, as is described in sections 175, 178, 179, 180 or 228 of the IPC. Investigation. The Commission exercises the following investigative powers while inquiring into the complaints. It may utilize the services of any officer or any of the investigative agency of the central or state governments with their prior approval. The officer or agency whose services are utilized by it shall be under the control and direction of the Commission. Second, further, the Commission may summon and enforce the attendance of any person and examine him, or direct such person to discover or produce any document before it. Requisition any public record or copy therefrom any office. Inquiry into complaints. The Commission, while inquiring into the complaints of the violation of human rights, may adopt the following procedure. It can call for information or report either from the central or any of the state government concerned or any other authority or organization subordinate to them within the time frame fixed by it. However, it may proceed to inquire into the complaint on its own if it does not receive the information or report within the time frame. But the Commission shall not proceed further if it is satisfied upon the report submitted by the concerned government or authority along with the action initiated. If, in the opinion of the Commission, a matter requires immediate action, it can initiate an inquiry even without asking the relevant government or authority for their report or information. Procedure with respect to armed forces. In accordance with the provisions of the Act, while dealing with the complaints of the armed forces, it adopts the following procedure. First one, it may, either on its own or upon receipt of a petition, can ask the central government to submit a report. After receiving report from the central government, it may not either proceed further or may make recommendations to that effect. Second, from the date of the receipt of the recommendations, the central government is bound to inform the Commission of the action taken by it within 3 months or within the period of extension as permitted by the Commission. The Commission has to publish a report on its recommendations under the action initiated by the central government upon them. Fourth one, the Commission transmits copy of the published report to the petitioner or his representative. If the Commission at any stage of inquiry considers it necessary to inquire into the conduct of any person, it may do so. But if, in the opinion of the Commission, such an inquiry may prejudicially affect the reputation of the person, it has to give a reasonable opportunity to that person to produce evidence in his favor during such inquiry. However, the Commission cannot conduct an inquiry if it affects the reputation of the person in any manner. Divisions of the Commission. First one, Administrative Division. This division is headed by a Joint Secretary, assisted by a Director, Under Secretaries, Section Officers and other secretarial staff, and functions under the overall guidance of the Secretary General. This division looks after the administrative, personnel, establishment and cadre matters of the staff and officers of the Commission. Second, Law Division. The division is headed by a registrar. For the sake of convenience, the Law Division has been divided in two classes. One is Scrutiny Branch, which deals with the cases which comes from Uttar Pradesh and Uttarakhand, and another branch, that is Scrutiny Branch, which deals with rest of India and foreign related complaints. Third one, Report Branch. After that report branch sends the notice as to the concerned authority as directed by the members of the Commission in a proper format, and report branch also receives the reply of those notices and thereby coordinate with presenting officer. Fourth one, Investigation Division. When the Commission requires an independent inquiry to be conducted, it is done through the Investigation Division, which is headed by an officer of the rank of Director General of Police. It analyzes the intimations and further reports from the state authorities regarding death in police and judicial custody, encounter deaths, and advising the Commission. Fifth one, Training Division. The division has been created to disseminate information and focus attention on sensitizing various agencies and NGOs, civil societies, to heighten respect for human rights by organizing human rights training programs. This division is headed by a chief coordinator who is a joint secretary rank officer. The chief coordinator is assisted by a senior research officer and other secretarial staff. Sixth one, Policy, Research, Project and Programs Division. Whenever the Commission, on the basis of its hearings, deliberations or otherwise, arrives at a conclusion that a particular subject is of generic importance, it is converted into a project or program to be dealt with by this division. It also undertakes and promotes research in human rights and organizes seminars, workshops and conferences on pertinent issues. Public Relations Division. This division disseminates information relating to the activities of the Commission through the print and electronic media and is headed by an Information and Public Relations Officer. This division is responsible for the website and the publications of the Commission. It also has an Assistant Information Officer. A Public Information Officer has also been appointed for the purpose of facilitating information under the Right to Information Act. The appellate authority is the Joint Secretary. Procedure for handling complaints by National Human Rights Commission. Promoting good complaint handling is a key part of your work if you receive complaints from time to time. Good complaint handling can make the people to have more faith on National Human Rights Commission. Some illustrative cases in connection with National Human Rights Commission. First one, National Human Rights Commission versus State of Arunachal Pradesh. The Commission under Article 32 of the Constitution of India has filed a writ petition as a public interest petition before the Supreme Court of India. The Commission filed this petition mainly for the enforcement of fundamental rights of about 65,000 Chakmas and Hajong tribals under Article 21 of the Constitution. In this case, a large number of refugees from erstwhile East Pakistan were displaced in 1964 due to Captain Haidar project. These displaced Chakmas had taken shelter in northeastern states of India, namely in Assam and Tripura. There were two main issues involved in this case. First one, conferring of citizenship. Second, fear of persecution by certain sections of the citizens of Arunachal Pradesh. Largely to these two issues, National Human Rights Commission was approached by two different NGOs. In this case, the Commission contended before the court that the Commission found serving of quit notices by all Arunachal Pradesh Students Union to Chakmas and their attempted enforcement appeared to be supported by the officers of Arunachal Pradesh. The state government deliberately delayed the disposal of the matter by not furnishing the required response to National Human Rights Commission and in fact assisted in the enforcement of eviction of the Chakmas from the state through its agencies. The court, after hearing the arguments, directed the government of Arunachal Pradesh to ensure the life and personal liberty of each and every Chakmas residing within the state. The significance of this judgment also lies in clearing the doubts regarding the applicability of fundamental rights to refugees. This decision rules that foreigners are entitled to enjoy the protection of right to life and liberty under Article 21 of the Constitution. Timely intervention by the Commission has saved the life of thousands of innocent Chakmas refugees from AAPSU. AAPSU means All Arunachal Pradesh Students Union. The second case, Indian Council of Legal Aid and Advice and others. On 3rd December 1996, the Commission took cognizance of a letter from Chaduranand Mishra, then Union Minister for Agriculture, regarding starvation deaths due to the drought in Balangir district of Orissa. In similar matter, a writ petition was filed on 23rd December 1996 by the Indian Council of Legal Aid and Advice and others before the Supreme Court of India under Article 32 of the Constitution. The petition alleged that death by starvation continued to occur in certain districts of Orissa. The Supreme Court of India on 26th July 1997 directed that since matter is seized with the National Human Rights Commission and is expected to deliver some order, the petitioner can approach to the Commission. Realizing the urgency of the matter, the Commission acted quickly and initially prepared an interim measure for the 2 years period and also requested the Odisha state government to constitute a committee to examine all aspects of the land reform questions in the KBK districts. The Commission observed that as starvation deaths reported from some pockets of the country are invariably the consequence of misgovernance resulting from acts of omission and commission on the part of the public servant. The Commission strongly supported the view that to be free from hunger is a fundamental right of the people of the country. Starvation, hence, continues a gross denial and violation of his right. The Commission organized a meeting with leading experts on the subject in January 2004 to discuss issues relating to right to food. The Commission has approved the constitution of a core group on right to food that can advise on issues referred to it and also suggest appropriate programs which can be undertaken by the Commission. By this decision, it is firmly established in the context of India that economic, social and cultural rights are treated par with the civil and political rights before the Indian courts and the Commission. India is amongst the few countries in the world which have accorded justiciability of economic, social and cultural rights. The third case, Punjab mass cremation order. 2 writ petitions were filed before the Supreme Court of India containing serious allegations about large-scale cremations resorted to by the Punjab police of persons allegedly killed in what were termed as encounters. The main thrust of the writ petition was that there were extrajudicial executions and hasty and secret cremations, rendering the state liable for the action. These petitions were largely relied on a press note of 16 January 1995 by the Human Rights Wing of the Shiromani Akali Dal under the caption "Disappeared Cremation Ground." The note alleged that the Punjab police had cremated a large number of human bodies after labeling them as unidentified. The Supreme Court, after examining the report submitted to the court by the Central Bureau of Investigation relating to cremation of dead bodies, observed that the report indicates 585 dead bodies were fully identified, 274 partially identified, and 1238 unidentified. The report discloses flagrant violation of human rights on a large scale. On 12th December 1996, the court requested the Commission to have the matter examined in accordance with law and determine all the issues related with the case. Though matter is still pending before the Commission for final consideration, the Commission granted in some cases compensation amounting of rupees 2,50,000 to the next of kin of the 89 deceased persons. While granting the compensation, the Commission relied on the law developed by the Court of India in the field of evolving legal standard for remedial reparatory, punitive and exemplary damage for violation of human rights. The Commission observed, it is now a well-accepted proposition in most of the jurisdictions that monetary or pecuniary compensation is an appropriate and indeed an effective and sometimes perhaps the only suitable remedy for the redressal of the established infringement of the fundamental right of life of a citizen by the public servants and the state. The claim of the citizen is based on the principle of strict liability, to which the defense of sovereign immunity is not available, and the citizen must receive the amount of compensation. Fourth case, Gujarat communal right. The Commission took suo motu action on communal right which took place in Gujarat in early 2002. The decision to take action was based on media reports, and both print and electronic. The Commission also received an email communication requesting the Commission to intervene. A team of Commission had visited Gujarat between 19 to 22 March 2002 and prepared a confidential report which is later made to the public. The release of the confidential report was initially withheld to provide an opportunity to the Gujarat government to comment on its contents, given the sensitivity of the allegations contained in it. Unfortunately, the state government did not bother much about this report. The Commission observed that the state has failed to discharge its primary and inescapable responsibility to protect the right to life, liberty, equality and dignity of all of those who constitute it. The principle of res ipsa loquitur, the affair speaking for itself, applies in this case in assessing the degree of state responsibility in the failure to protect the constitutional rights of the people of Gujarat. The responsibility of the state extended not only to the acts of its own agents, but also to those of non-state players within its jurisdiction and to any action that may cause or facilitate the violation of human rights. Shortcomings of National Human Rights Commission. First one, the method of selection of the members of the Commission needs attention. The selection of the members is wholly weighed towards the ruling party and the principal opposition, both at the center and the state level. The National Human Rights Commission does not have a power to appoint its own staff. Second, the composition of National Human Rights Commission is least balanced, as 3 out of 5 members must be judges both in the national as well as state commission, and all would have to be political appointees. So, at least 2 members are required to be appointed from among the persons having knowledge of or practical experience in the matters related to human rights. Representations should be given to the NGOs and human rights activists to instill confidence in the minds of the people. Third one, the relation between National Human Rights Commission and State Commission should be made amply clear, because sometimes questions arise over jurisdiction and control. The revisional power over the State Commission should be enumerated as of the power of National Human Rights Commission. The essence of the revisional power is to have control by way of supervision, especially the power to call for records. Fourth one, another major drawback is the lack of independent budget of the National Human Rights Commission. The present scenario is that the purse of National Human Rights Commission is totally dependent on the government to meet the expense of investigation and research apart from the allowances and salaries. Actually, there should be provision for drawing the salaries directly from the consolidated fund so as to ensure greater autonomy and transparency. There is inherent drawback in Section 12C of the Act. The necessity of intimation severely inhibits and defeats the investigation of the Commission. It is such a loophole that makes the whole exercise eyewash. It is therefore recommended that the requirement of informing the state government about the Commission's visit to such place should be waived off. This shall certainly help the Commission to make spot inquiries and represent the true picture of human rights violation. Sixth one. Further, Section 13 of the Act deals with powers of the National Human Rights Commission relating to inquiries. There is nothing in this section regarding the transfer of cases. It is suggested that National Human Rights Commission may be given the power to transfer any of the case or complaints filed or pending before it to the state commission of the state from where the complaint arises, whenever it considers expedient. Seventh one, the Commission suffers from the limitation of its own function. It can intervene in any proceedings pending before a court regarding violation of human rights as and when any matter is reported to it, but it has to seek prior approval of concerned authority. This hinders its function as the concerned authority may linger it unnecessarily to avoid the Commission. Eighth one, Section 36 Clause 1 of the Act provides that the National Human Rights Commission shall not inquire into any matter which is pending before a state commission or any other commission duly constituted under any law for the time being in force. This obstacle should be removed by the amendment in 1993 because many governments deliberately hand over the case to another commission for sidelining the Human Rights Commission. For any reason whatsoever, if the government intends to deprive the Commission for the jurisdiction to inquire into any violation of human rights, it can do so by constituting a separate commission under any law in force. The Commission under the 1993 Act is not empowered to take any punitive action against the violator. It is also not bestowed with any contempt power for defying its order by the government officials. It can only make recommendation for the action to be taken by the concerned authority. Another provision that needs attention is that the Commission under the 1993 Act merely act as an instrumentality between the victim and the government for lawful solution to the violation of human rights and make its own recommendations, leaving the result to the government or the courts. Media and human rights in India. Media has been entrusted with the responsibility of guarding the rights of the people in a democratic political system. This points towards the pivotal role that media can play in ensuring that the people who make a political system enjoy its positive outcome. However, it is important to come out of the visionary discourse of media and critical look at its role and function in our present socio-political context. Media as the promoter of human rights in India. Media, especially the print, has played an important role in educating and informing citizens of their rights as well as the violations of such rights. Significant section of the national press has dared to oppose events that have changed the course of history in India. Emergency, Babari Masjid's demolition, murder of Graham Staines and his children, the Godhra carnage, and recently Nandigram. Media as promoter of human rights violation. India Today reporters Shyam Tiwani, involved in covering Indian peacekeeping force operation in Sri Lanka, took photographs of the Indian soldiers captured and killed by the LTTE, only to realize they used to mutilate the bodies because he would click the photographs. During the 1992 riots, mobs burned more houses and other buildings in order to create a spectacle for the photographers. The Taliban in Afghanistan has also gone on to burn the dead bodies and mutilate them in order to get better publicity through the so-called foreign journalists. Public interest litigation. Public interest litigation is an opportunity to make basic rights meaningful to the deprived and vulnerable sections of the community. To assure vulnerable sections of social, economic, and political justice, any public spirited person through public interest litigation can approach the court themselves due to their vulnerable conditions. Therefore, public interest litigation has become the tool for the protection of human rights in India. Module 5 New Social Movements, Dalit, OBC and Women Empowerment. New social movement is a late 20th century phenomenon. It is also a new paradigm in the social movement literature. The new social movement theorists argue that contemporary movements represent fundamentally new forms of collective action with new goals, values, and constituents. The term new social movement refers to a cluster of movements that began to emerge in the 1960s under the assorted banner of students' movements, peace movements, environmental movements, second wave feminism, animal rights, and so on. Habermas offered a more detailed exposition and critique of his arguments on new social movements. Dalit, tribals, and OBC movements in Kerala. For years, the Dalits suffered from social injustice and exploitation so as to prevent them from rising above the social status fixed for them. The Dalits, being on the lowest rung of the social ladder, were denied entry into several occupations which were relatively cleaner. They were associated with a variety of specialized traditional occupations such as scavenging, cobbling, and disposal of carcasses, etc. The problem of untouchability and exploitation of Dalits in social, economic, and political areas has been a stark reality of Indian society.
Various efforts have been made so far as by visionaries in this direction by launching movements and forming organizations to broad and find solution to the problems of the Dalits. Certain constitutional provisions for SCs, STs and OBC. Article 14 of the Constitution, which provides equality before law. The state shall not deny to any person equality before the law or the equal protection of the law within the territory of India. Further, in Article 15, the state prohibits the discrimination on the grounds of religion, race, caste, sex, or place of birth. This article seems to be the first article which indicates the reservation for Dalits. It provides that the state can make special provisions for the upliftment of any socially and educationally backward classes of citizens or for the scheduled caste and scheduled tribes, some selected people, and nothing in this constitution comes in contradiction to this provision. Article 15, Clause 5. This clause was added in 93rd Amendment in 2005 and allows the state to make special provision for backward classes for admission in private educational institutions, aided or unaided. Article 16, Clause 4. This allows the state to reserve vacancies in public services for any backward classes of the state that are not adequately represented in the public service. Article 16, 4b. This allows the seats considered unfilled vacancies reserved for backward classes as a separate class of vacancies not subject to a limit of 50% reservation. Article 17. This eradicates untouchability and its practices in any form. Article 46 has been framed with the particular attention paid to the promotion of education and economic interest of scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, and the weaker sections. It says, the state shall promote with special care and educational and economic interest of the weaker sections of the people, and in particular of the scheduled caste and scheduled tribes, and shall protect them from social injustice and all forms of exploitation. There shall be special officer for scheduled caste and scheduled tribes to be appointed by the President. It should be the duty to the officer to investigate all matters relating to the safeguards provided for the scheduled caste and scheduled tribes under the Constitution. It has been provided in Article 338 of the Constitution that all matters relating to the safeguards provided to scheduled caste will be reported to this officer, who in turn will report the same to the President. Certain Dalit collective initiatives. Kerala Harijan Federation. It was Pyramid Taluk Harijan Federation which organized lower caste people living in Pyramid Taluk in the beginning, which eventually became a high-range Harijan Federation which functioned without the consideration of subcaste, religion, and politics. After 2 decades, this organization changed its name to All Kerala Harijan Federation by merging similar organizations. The All Kerala Harijan Federation changed its name to Kerala Harijan Federation shortly. Kerala Harijan Federation was an organization aimed at working for the liberation of lower class in Kerala, Dalit, Adivasi, and other depressed Christians who were the target groups. It was formed without consideration of party politics and hierarchies based on subcastes. Adasthida Navodhana Munnani. Adasthida Navodhana Munnani is an organization founded in 1987 under the leadership of K. M. Salim Kumar. This organization focused on the self-esteem of Dalit and making Dalit proud of their identity. It also rejected the idea of approaching Dalits as lower class. They have conceived Dalits and Adivasis as a common group and worked towards the politicization of both communities. They have conducted many meetings to discuss the internal issues of Dalit community. They published a magazine, Adhasthita Navodhana Munnani Bulletin, in which they have published many articles relating to Dalit and Adivasi issues. Burning of Manasmuradi was a protest staged mainly by the ANM to protest against the Hindu hegemony and the prevailing injustice towards Dalit community. Certain Dalit Adivasi struggles in Kerala. Muthanya land struggle. In 2001, the shocking death of 32 Adivasis from starvation forced the Adivasis in Wayanad to renew their struggle for land. One of the reasons cited for the starvation deaths among the Adivasis were the lack of land for cultivation. Resultantly, a new organization, the Adivasi Gotham Mahasabha, was formed. On August 30, 2001, the agitations gathered in the capital city of Thiruvananthapuram and began to campaign with the slogan, "Right to live in the land one is born." After several weeks of protest, a 7-point agreement was reached with the Chief Minister A.K. Antony, who promised to give 5 acres of land to each Adivasi family. Even after 45 days, even the government failed to abide the agreement. AGMS protesters encroached into the Muthanga Wildlife Sanctuary in Wayanad on January 5, 2003. Harlem farm protest. With the rising demand of the tribals for their rightful land, the Kerala government signed an agreement with the State Farms Corporation of India in June 2004 to use the 3,060 hectares of the Central State Farm in Harlem for the resettlement of the Adivasis. The rehabilitation process was incorporate the tribals of Kannur and Wayanad district into the project. However, in 2006, the Left Democratic Front came up with the plan of establishing an ecotourism project on the farm to exploit it for tourism purposes. It also decided to exclude the Adivasis from Wayanad district from the rehabilitation agreement. The delay in the process of rehabilitation and the exclusion of the tribals from Wayanad instigated a fresh movement by the Adivasis. Thousands of Adivasis encroached into the farmland and started living there, which put the state government under pressure to start the process of distribution of title deeds. The rehabilitation plan promised each eligible family 1 acre of land along with basic facilities like drinking water and other facilities. Arippa Bhusamaram. In 2009, the Kerala government decided to set aside 21.54 acres of the 90-acre Arippa revenue forest in Kulathupuzha village for the beneficiaries of the Chengara package. The remaining 68.46 acres was kept aside for institutional development. On December 31st, 2012, around 1,300 Adivasis, Dalits and landless poor encroached into the remaining land in Arippa forest and began their protest by building shanties and living there. The protesters claiming that a part of the forest was surplus revenue land meant for redistribution among the landless tribals. Under the banner of Adivasi Dalit Munneta Samiti, the agitators raised the slogan, "We do not want 3 cents of land. All we want is land for cultivation." Among the protesters were people who had taken part in the historic Changara land struggle and were given title deeds but found themselves cheated when they realized that the land allotted to them was neither fit for cultivation nor was it suitable for habitation. After 1.5 years of relentless struggle, a discussion was called by the Chief Minister of Kerala with the representatives of Adivasis and the Dalits protesting in Apika, which ended without reaching any final decision. Women empowerment. The 1980s is a crucial period in the history of feminist movement as women's organizations began to get established under the leadership of educated middle-class women who were influenced by Marxist ideology. These organizations began to develop a critique of Kerala society from women's standpoint, highlighting the lower status of women in society and family. These organizations posed challenges to the mainstream left's understanding of society. Drawing from Marxist idea of society, these women's groups tried to extend such debate to understand the gender dimension. Discrimination faced by women in all spheres of life was the focal point of debates of such organizations. These organizations discussed a wide range of issues which affected women's life in general. The topic ranges from domestic violence, mobility, property rights, dowry, and domestic division of labor. There had also been discussion about cultural implication of gender in Kerala. Anveshi is a women's organization set up under the leadership of K. Ajita, a notable women activist and leader in Kerala. She was a leader of CPIML group and was a revolutionary activist during 60s, and later she left the extreme left organizations and established herself as a feminist. This organization established an important wing called Anveshi Women's Counseling Center in November 1993. Anveshi is part of a network of small radical women's emancipation groups in Kerala called Kerala's Trivedi. Its work in the Kozhikode district of North Kerala over the years, its activities have been extended to adjacent districts of Malappuram, Wayanad, Kannur, and Kasaragod. Anveshi has been collaborating with other NGOs and government departments in its efforts to highlight the issues of growing violence against women in Kerala and in its struggle to get justice for women and children who are victims of such violence. Sahayatrika. The concept of Sahayatrika was shaped a decade ago in a context when social activists initiated several studies and enquiries into the growing number of suicides among women from different social, economic, and vocational backgrounds. The idea of an independent collective arose as we realized the need to address the gravity of human rights violation they had faced in their private as well as public lives, both directly and indirectly. Satyagraha aims at a deeper and inclusive approach regarding their rights in order to understand the specificity of the problems faced by women of various identities. Janasri and other programs. In addition to Kudumbasri, which is the official state program, a private initiative called Janasri has been launched in recent times for empowerment and for grassroots development through people's participation. Registered as an NGO in 2006, it has organized 60,190 Janasri Sanghams, which encompass an approximate beneficiary participation of 12.5 lakhs. 65,000 SHGs formed in the villages has federated themselves to be part of Janasri through district level apex federations. Microfinance is one of the major activities of the Janasri mission. In short, in a society, women's status is very much connected with their economic status and their participation in productive work.
Human rights are, no doubt, the inalienable of individuals, but it should be protected. For maintaining or preserving human rights, there are a large number of movements appeared in different walks of life. Before going into details about human rights movements in the country, first of all, let us make a comprehensive look about the civil liberties movement. Civil liberties movement. Civil liberties are associated with basic rights and freedoms that are guaranteed either explicitly identified in the Bill of Rights and the Constitution or deduced through the years by courts and legislatures. Civil liberties are personal assurance and freedom that the government cannot curtail either by law or by judicial interpretation without due process. The evolution of civil liberties movement in India can be traced back in the pre-independence era, where the national liberation struggle was rising up against the British tyranny. Main focus of the movement was on indefinite detention without trial initiated by the British government, and which ultimately posed a serious threat to the civil liberties. Hence, civil liberty movement got momentum as part of national movement. As a consequence, Indian Civil Liberty Union was established by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru in 1931. Though the range of the term differs from country to country, but the basic of civil liberties include similar things. These include freedom of speech, the right to property, right to be free from unreasonable searches of your home, the right to a fair court trial, the right to marry, the right to vote. Other civil liberties include the right to own property, the right to defend oneself, and the right to bodily integrity. Within the distinction between civil liberties and other type of liberty, distinctions exist between positive liberty or positive right and negative liberty or negative rights. A civil and democratic rights movement in India, with its very obvious influences drawn from Western democracies, had rather fortuitous beginning in India. From a largely limited activist base from the emergency period of the 1970s, it has since moved into newer areas with newer sources of support, especially among more marginalized sections. But the movement, unlike its counterpart in the West, remained constantly challenged by prevailing complexities of the political process. The emergence of newer identities and shifting quality of these identities, shaped by the very nature of politics and electoral process in India, coupled with the paucity of similar experiences in Western liberal democracies, ensures that civil and democratic rights movements has to often formulate its own responses, make its own theoretical and conceptual innovations to meet such challenges. Human rights movements in India. The foundation of the modern human rights movement seems to have been laid in India only during the course of the anti-colonial struggle. The first human rights group in the country, the Civil Liberties Union, was formed by Jawaharlal Nehru and some of his associates in the early 1930s with the aim of providing legal support to nationalists accused of sedition against the colonial authorities. In 1936, Jawaharlal Nehru came forward to form the first civil liberties organization. The Indian Civil Liberties Union was established in Bombay in 1936 with Rabindranath Tagore as its president. In 1945, Sir Tej Bahadur Sapru brought forth a constitutional proposal emphasizing the importance of fundamental rights. They were integrated in the Indian Constitution. Thus, liberties and rights protected in the Indian Constitution were product of the freedom struggle of the people of India. Let's see some of the important and active state level organizations. The Andhra Pradesh Civil Liberties Committee, the Committee for the Protection of Democratic Rights in Maharashtra, the Association for Democratic Rights in Punjab, the Naga People's Movement for Human Rights in Nagaland, Lok Adhikar Sangh in Gujarat, Citizens for Democracy in Delhi, Mumbai and other places. Human rights element and in social reform movements in India. It is found that the genesis and growth of human rights movement in India could be found in the various socio-religious reform movements championed by the great social reformers from time to time. It can be said that the exhibition of concern for the human rights of individuals by the leaders of the national movement came quite late. It was manifested during 1930s when Nehru started the Civil Liberties Union to provide legal aid to the freedom fighters accused of treason. Indian National Congress, founded in 1885, only realized the importance of human rights in its Karachi session of 1931, passed the first resolution demanding civil liberties and equal rights of citizens. In the realm of socio-religious reform movements, Bengal happens to be the pioneering state. Drawing upon lead given by the torchbearers of European Renaissance, the social reformers like Rajaram Mohan Roy and Ishwara Chandra Vidyasagar waged a relentless struggle for upliftment in this social status of certain sections like women. They not only tried to protect the human rights of these people by calling for the abolition of inhuman social and religious practices that unleashed untold miseries on them, but also tried to preserve for the protection of their human rights by empowering them through the medium of education and generating awareness among them for their rights and responsibilities in society. The social reformers in Bengal received immense support and help from a number of Western social reformers and educationalists, such as David Hare, Sister Nivedita, and Darcio, and also certain humanist British officials like Governor General Lord William Bentinck in getting their efforts eventually bearing fruit. Justice M. G. Ranade founded the Indian Social Conference in 1887 precisely for the purpose of working towards the realization of a dignified and respectful life for the socially disadvantaged sections of society by eradicating the socio-religious practices violating human rights of such people. Another formidable social reform movement in Maharashtra, having deep-rooted implication for the growth of human rights movement in country, was launched by Jyotiba Phule under the auspices of Satyashodhak Samaj to seek the protection and promotion of the human rights of the people belonging to the oppressed classes. Early leads for the growth of human rights movement in India also came from the various socio-religious reform movements initiated in various parts of the South India. The prominent among such movement appears to be the movement launched by Sri Narayana Guru safeguarding the norms and customs of the Irava community in Travancore. Apart from this, numerous other socio-religious movements were also launched in different parts of the region, which sought either to protect or to promote the socio-religious rights of hitherto marginalized sections of society belonging to lower caste. The other socio-religious reform movements such as Arya Samaj of Swami Dayananda Saraswati, the Ramakrishna Mission of Swami Vivekananda, and the Aligarh School founded by Syed Ahmad Khan added pace for the growth of human rights movement in the country. These were basically religious reform movements having repercussions on the social standing of the people as well. Thus, while the first two movements worked hard to reform the Hindu society, the last one was aimed at bringing about some sort of awakening among the Muslim society. The impact of these movements was remarkable in bringing about appreciable social awakening among the masses, as a result of which they became vigilant warriors of demanding basic liberties from the colonial rulers. Human rights movement in the post-independent period. The human rights movement in the post-independence period is normally divided into two phases: pre and post-emergency. Human rights in the pre-emergency period and the human rights movement in the post-emergency period. In the post-independence time, despite having one of the most elaborate exhibition of the fundamental human rights of the people, the operationalization of human rights in country became quite problematic. The inherent contradiction in the socio-economic system of the country alienated large number of people from the enjoyment of even the basic human rights guaranteed to the citizens of India. Moreover, with the disappearance of euphoria attached to the attainment of the independence for the country, the harsh realities of running a democratic system of government in heterogeneous countries started having a telling effect on the enjoyment of human rights by the people. When claims and counterclaims started being made on the social status, economic resources, and political positions of the country, the Indian state began to find it in an utterly helpless position to accommodate the aspirations of all the sections of the society. Consequently, multiple types of violations of human rights appeared on the Indian landscape. For instance, while the old-fashioned and exploitative social economic system continued to permit the exploitation of one section of the society at the hands of a few, any radical move on part of marginalized people to either seek their due in the socio-economic and political life of the country or claim preferential treatment by government met with stiff resistance not only by the vested interest of the society but also by the Indian state on numerous occasions. When the inherent fallacy of such an emotive decoy failed to convince the proponents of human rights of the citizens, the government started showing its true color by taking repressive actions against those agitating for the human rights of the common man. Consequently, two kinds of reactions seem to forthcoming in face of the growing violations of human rights of the people at the hands of the government. The radicals, who would not retain their faith in the efficiency and effectiveness of democratic constitution to bring about any substantive transformation in the socio-economic and political life of the common people, floated a violent mode of struggle in the form of Naxalite movement. However, the moderate elements among the crusaders for the human rights opted for the democratic and peaceful method for settling up civil liberties groups in order to raise the issue of human rights violations. Human rights movement in the post-emergency period. In the regime of Srimati Indira Gandhi, who imposed emergency on 25th June 1975, brought a negative impetus on the civil rights movements. She suspended the fundamental rights, suing that they were used by the privileged sections to prevent her from carrying out programs in the interest of the majority. The liberal intellectuals were surprised by the realization of the built-in authoritarian tendencies within the political system and the drawback endemic in any assumption of the durability of the democratic process as heretofore. This formed the intellectual and political setting that led to the origin of the civil and democratic rights movement. Numerous civil liberties organizations were emerged during this period to fight for civil and democratic rights. Arguably, the most formidable assault on the human rights of the people came in the wake of the imposition of national emergency in the country by the government of Ms. Indira Gandhi in June 1975. Under the leadership of certain die-hard Democrats, the bodies like the People Union for Democratic Rights and the People's Union for Civil Liberties became the leading organizations, putting up a brave and effective front to defend the human rights of the people in the face of growing wrath of the state machinery against the human rights of one and all. Consequently, the groups such as Association for the Protection of Democratic Rights and Andhra Pradesh Civil Liberties Committee were set up in 1972 and 1974 respectively, though in course of time their functional domain remained confined to identification, investigation, documentation, and in certain cases campaign against cases of violation of human rights. Significantly, the strengthening of human rights movement in India owes in main to the untiring efforts of numerous non-governmental organizations as well as public-spirited individuals working in diverse spheres of public life. Another remarkable high point in the efforts of human rights organization came when the government of India decided to set up National Human Rights Commission in 1993. Interestingly, though a number of statutory commission and institutions existed for the protection and promotion of the rights of certain sections of the society like scheduled caste and scheduled tribe, it was realized that such bodies neither have the mindset nor logistical support to effectively protect the rights of even their target groups. Moreover, the necessity was felt for some sort of dedicated national as well as provincial bodies that can comprehensively look into the issues of protection and promotion of human rights of all sections of the society with adequate powers and administrative support system. Environmental movements in India. The environmental movements are conceived as broad networks of people and organizations engaged in collective action in the pursuit of the environmental benefits. Environmental movements are understood to be very diverse and complex. They are organizational forms ranging from the highly organized and formally institutionalized to the radical informal. The spatial scope of their activities ranging from the local to the almost global. The nature of their concerns ranging from single issue to the full panoply of global environmental concerns. Fundamental movements appeared in India during 1970s. This period witnessed the emergence of a series of movements that vibrate different parts of India. The company, with the silent support of the government, tried to divert the attention of the men. The women folk stepped in to save their environment and their livelihood. They started hugging trees in order to prevent them from being axed. This simple action transformed into an organized and peaceful movement under the leadership of Chandra Prasad Bhatt. The movement largely inspired by Gandhian principles of non-violent Satyagraha. This was the first movement of this kind, not just in post-independent India, but also across the world. Finally, Prime Minister Indira Gandhi declared a ban on trees logging in the 5,000 kilometers trans-Himalayan region. The most active participants of the movement include Sundarlal Bahuguna, Chandra Prasad Bhatt, Dhom Singh Negi, Ghanshyam Rathuri, and Indas Tikekar. Sundarlal Bahuguna, the prominent leader, coined the word ecology is permanent ecology. In fact, the Chipko movement inspired Vandana Shiva for the development of a new theory called as ecofeminism. which especially explains the link between the women and the ecology. Apika Movement. Followed the success of Chipko movement, the people of Karnataka started Apika Chatewali movement. The Apiko in Karnataka language means to hug. The people of northern Kannada district organized and protested when the natural forests were cleared by the contractors, which led to soil erosion and drying up of water resources. In the Salkani village in Sissi, the people were deprived of the only patch of forest left near their surrounding villages to obtain fuel wood, fodder and honey, etc. In September 1983, this led youth and women to launch a Chipko movement in Karnataka. Youth and children from Salkani and the surrounding villages walked 5 miles to a nearby forest and hugged trees here. They stopped the axeman who was felling trees, pursuing the order of the forest department of the state. The people demanded ban on felling trees. They were ready to sacrifice their lives for this cause. The protest continued 38 days, which forced the government to withdraw the felling orders. Silent Valley Movement. This movement came into limelight by Kerala Shastra Sahitya Parishad. An NGO raised their voice to stop the Silent Valley Hydro project in 1978. Silent Valley is rich in tropical forest with enormous bioreserve. The state government of Kerala wanted a hydroelectric project for the power-hungry state inside a deep tropical forest in Silent Valley. This tropical forest was the only remaining one in the country. The environmentalists objected to the project and filed a case in High Court, which they lost. Project was cancelled by the help of Ms. Indira Gandhi. The Silent Valley movement was one of the successful movements which prevented the construction of hydro project in the river. The Silent Valley is situated in the high mountains of Western Ghats, is about 45 kilometers away from Mannarkad of Palakkad district in Kerala state. It forms a part of the core area of Nilagiri biosphere. Silent Valley movement is a remarkable people's movement that saved the moist evergreen forest in Kerala from being destroyed by a hydroelectric project by Kerala State Electricity Board in 1970 across Kunti River and would submerge 8.3 square kilometers of untouched moist evergreen forest. The importance of Silent Valley rests not its evergreen scenery but its entangledness to people's life. This area is rich in natural resources, wildlife and a cool climate. More than 100 varieties of orchids can be seen in the area. Plants of high medicinal values also have its presence there. The value is a home of 25 species of mammals, 95 species of butterflies, 12 species of fish, 35 species of reptiles and 255 species of moss-girl. The largest wildcat, land-tailed macaque and the Nilagiri langoose are found in the valley. So this valley is not only important for the people of Nilagiri biosphere but for other animals too. This was the reason people across different fields of life such as poets, scientists, educationalists, common man and the non-government organization in sector protested and agitated, and this resulted the dropping of this project by the government. Narmada Bachao Andolan. In the state Madhya Pradesh, Gujarat, it was started to protest the construction of dam around 30 in number on the river Narmada to produce hydroelectricity and irrigation facility to the drought-prone area of Kutch. Gujarat social activist Baba Amte, an environmentalist, and Medha Patkar are the two leaders to fight against the government and judiciary for the benefit of tribal of that affected region. Noted writer Arundhati Roy also joined the movement. It was estimated that two big dams construction on the river Narmada cost rupees 30,923 crores and rupees 8,190 crores by way of environmental laws. Besides this, the project will submerge about 1,30,482 hectares, of which 50,681 hectares are prime agricultural land arid, 56,066 hectares are forest. The two dams, namely Sardar Sarovar project and Narmada Sagar project, have enormous utilities to the people for supply of electricity and irrigation, but the estimated environmental cost is too much to ignore according to the report by environment scientists. The Mitani movement was movement focused on the issue of displacement and rehabilitation in relation to the expansion of NTPC in the village of Sonbhadra. The movement successfully gained a large compensation package. Jharkhandi Organization Against Radiation, a movement which was started as a movement for rehabilitation and settlement of VCIL in Jharkhand, later turned to a movement which also addressed issues like radioactive waste management and health hazards caused by radioactivity. Beej Bachao Andolan stands for the protection of variety of indigenous seeds from extinction.